The Victorian Workhouse was designed to scare you into taking any job, no matter how bad it was. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, Parliament passed wave after wave of Enclosure Act. These laws ended century-old communal rights for rural people to grow food, graze animals, and gather food on shared land. Fences went up, notices went out, and generations who had farmed on small plots and kept animals on the commons lost their vital source of income and food. Overnight. Without land, there's no way to feed your family except to sell your labour for wages. So people were forced to leave their rural towns and villages and move into big cities, not for opportunity, but because staying put meant starvation. Industrial employers benefited from this displacement. They needed a steady flow of workers into their factories, mines, mills, and building sites. Landless people who have no independent means of survival are more desperate. The more desperate the workers are, the lower the wages can be. The old parish relief system was a problem for this new order. The parish had given the poor food in times of hardship. This let them hold out for better work or survive between jobs. This gave workers some bargaining power. They could refuse the most exploitative conditions. Industrialists and landowners did not like this, so they pushed for reform. They wanted a system that forced people into work, whatever work was going. And so in 1834, they passed the Poor Law Amendment Act. This was intended to replace the local parish relief system with a national system of workhouses. The stated goal was to make assistance available to those in need while reducing the cost to the taxpayer. Relief would still be given, but only inside of these institutions, and only under conditions harsh enough to deter all but the most desperate. The lawmakers made a rule. Conditions in the workhouse should be worse than those of the lowest paid labour. It was called the principle of less eligibility. It meant the system was designed as a warning, not as a refuge. To access help, you had to enter the workhouse. People could not avail of assistance and stay in their own homes. Once inside, residents wore institutional clothing, their hair was cut, and families were separated. Men, women, and children were housed in separate areas. So all the women in one room, all the men in another, all the children in another. Food was plain and repetitive. Meals consisted of bread, thin broth, and the famous Oliver Twist meal, gruel. Work here was compulsory. Residents were required to perform tasks. This included breaking stones, working in laundries, picking oakum, grinding bones for fertilizer, or even just picking apart an old rope. The point was obedience, not output. Some of these tasks served no economic purpose. They were simply designed to pass time and enforce discipline. Some of this work, though, produced goods for the consumer market. Women here did laundry, sewing, cooking. While the outputs were sold, none of these people were paid for their time. Politicians described the workhouse as a system for reforming the poor. And newspapers echoed that same line, that strict discipline would discourage idleness. Poverty, they said, was a matter of your bad habits and weak morals, and a strict regime would fix that. This framed poverty as a result of your personal failure, rather than what it was, the direct consequence of enclosures, land seizures, the destruction of cooperative farming, and wages set deliberately too low to live on. Middle-class taxpayers were told that this was protecting their money from being wasted, that the poor were undeserving. This was a powerful message, and boy did it stick. It worked on three fronts. The middle class are told you are virtuous because you work and you are able to live within your means. This is very flattering to the self-image. They believe we are the respectable ones. We keep society running. And it assured them that the government was protecting their money from waste. But in reality, the savings here for the middle class were minimal, especially compared to the wealth transfer to the very top, who got cheap labour, compliant workers, and no public safety net. This did not benefit the middle class, most of whom were one life event away from the workhouse at any given moment. But their arrogance is used, as it is always used, to support policies that protect and enrich the elite. They sell the idea that only harsh poor relief could keep the lower orders disciplined. They tell the middle class that this is what's required to reduce the risk of riots or civil unrest or theft. They present the workhouse as a safeguard for middle class businesses, completely ignoring the fact that it was the same elite policies that had created the poverty in the first place. Enclosures, industrial slums, unsafe work, and suppression of wages. The ruling class presented the workhouse as the cure for social disorder, while actively profiting from the causes of that social disorder. Even poor labourers start to support this idea because it drew a line between them and those in the workhouse. It created an us versus them within the working class. This meant that people who should have been allies become suspicious rivals, and class solidarity is almost impossible. Most people never went inside a workhouse. They didn't need to. The threat of it was enough. Knowing that you could be separated from your children, made to wear this uniform, and have to live under constant surveillance, that was enough to keep people in line. So they accepted these starvation wages and unsafe jobs just to avoid the workhouse. This embedded in British culture the idea that poverty is your personal failure, not systematic dispossession. And once embedded, that belief has policed people's behaviour way better than any overseer could. And it still does today. The ideas outlived the buildings themselves. They shaped how we now see welfare, how we treat people on benefits, and how we keep designing systems that say they're meant to help, but mostly they just humiliate. The workhouse system may be gone, but the logic remains. We see it in welfare processes that are deliberately slow and difficult. We see it in workplace support that functions more as punishment. And we see it in the quiet fear that keeps people compliant in bullshit jobs because the alternative feels like social death. The workplace was never just a building, it was a political technology for controlling labour.